The wrongness reached me before the cold did, and I had served Harrowfell long enough to trust the wrongness more than the cold. I am the steward of that house, was, and will be until they carry me out feet first, and a steward learns a building the way a sailor learns a hull. I know when a door has been opened that should have stayed shut. I know the precise weight of the dowager's footstep on the gallery boards, and the lighter, guiltier weight of a servant who has been somewhere he ought not. That night, with the blizzard already 2 days deep over the hollow moor and the high road buried past finding, I felt the house tighten around a thing that did not belong in it. I could not have named it. I only knew, walking the long cold corridor with my candle hunched in my hand, that somewhere under our roof a man was deciding to do something he could not undo. What I did not yet know, what no one in that snowbound castle knew but one, was that the silent guardsman at the inner door had already felt it too, and he, unlike me, had already decided what he would do about it. Let me set the house for you, because the house is half the tale. Harrowfell sits alone on a shoulder of the hollow moor, a day's hard ride from the nearest town and farther than that from any help once the snows come. It belongs to the House of Vale, a small, old, proud line, more land than money these days, more memory than land. The Dowager Countess Ardith Vale keeps it, a straight-backed woman of 70 who has buried a husband and 2 sons and refuses, on principle, to be pitied for any of it. Once a winter she opens the castle for the long night, gathering kin and connections, and a few useful strangers drawn up the moor road for 3 days of fires and feasting before the deep cold seals the pass. It is the one extravagance she allows herself, and the one duty I dread, because 3 days of guests under one roof is 3 days of watching. That year the snows came early and came wrong. The first night was the gathering as it always is, the great hall blazing, the long table loud, the wind a far-off complaint beyond thick walls. By the second morning the complaint had become a siege. The snow drove flat across the moor in white ropes, and when young Pell the undergroom tried to ride for the town he was back inside the hour, ice in his eyebrows, the horse refusing the gait. The pass was gone. We were, all of us, 11 guests, the family, the household, shut in together with the storm for a wall. "Well," said the Dowager when Pell brought the word to the hall, "then we shall simply have to endure one another's company a while longer." She said it lightly for the room, but I stood near enough to see her hand close hard on the head of her cane, and I understood. A locked house is a safe house until it is the opposite. There is nowhere to send a man you cannot trust. There is nowhere for an honest man to flee a thing he is wrongly blamed for. The snow that keeps the world out also keeps everything in. And under that roof that night was the Vale Star. You will not have heard of it, and that is as the family prefers. It is not a great jewel as great jewels go, a single old sapphire the deep blue of a winter dusk, set in worn silver, on a chain that has gone soft with 300 years of handling. Its worth is not in carats. It is the piece the eldest Vale wears at the long night, and only then. It has hung at the throat of every countess and count of the line back beyond record. It is the house made small enough to clasp around a neck. The Dowager had worn it the first night, at the head of her table, and the firelight had moved in it like something alive. After, as she always did, she had locked it in the small iron box in the muniment room, behind the oak door at the end of the inner passage, the passage where the guardsman stood. His name was Corvin Race. I should tell you about him, because the whole of what follows turns on a man who never raised his voice through any of it. The Vales kept 2 guardsmen, a courtesy more than a force, a memory of grander days when the house had a garrison. Through the year they manned the gate and walked the walls. But for the long night the Dowager set one of them on the inner door at the mouth of the muniment passage in the old way. Full kit, the dark green of the house, the tall fur, white gloves, a straight back through the whole long watch. It was ceremony mostly. It was the house remembering itself. Most guests passed Corvin Race the way you pass a suit of armor in a hall, a thing of the furniture, eyes that did not see you because surely there was no living man behind them to bother seeing. I knew better. I had watched Race 2 winters now. He was a still man, the stillest I have known, but his was not the stillness of an empty room. It was the stillness of deep water. You could not see the bottom, but you knew there was a great deal of it. He had soldiered somewhere hard before he came to us. He never spoke of it, and I never asked. And he watched. Lord, how that man watched! Behind a face that gave away nothing. His eyes did the whole night's work, and they missed nothing that crossed the mouth of that passage. So, the storm without, the star within, the still man at the door, and 11 guests sealed in with all of it. Let me bring you the one who matters most among them, though I did not know yet that he mattered. Gerald Ashby, a cousin of the house, by the loose reckoning the long night uses for kin, a soft-spoken man of 50-odd in a coat gone shiny at the cuffs, who laughed a half-beat too eagerly at the dowager's dry remarks and refilled other men's glasses before they were empty. The sort of guest a steward learns to read in a glance. A man who has come a long way up a hard road in a thin coat because the warmth and the meals were worth the cold to him. There is no shame in being poor. Half the proud old names that gathered at that table were poorer than they let on. But Ashby wore his want where it showed, and want, in a house full of treasure, is a thing that makes other people nervous. They did not say it. They did not need to. I saw how the talk cooled a half-degree when he leaned in, how Lady Marrow drew her bracelet hand back into her lap, how the whole room had, without one word spoken, already decided which of them it would suspect if anything ever went missing. I felt sorry for the man. That was my first mistake, not the pity, but thinking the pity was the whole of what I felt. Because under the pity, if I am honest with you, even I had half decided the same thing the room had. Watch the poor cousin. And a steward who has half decided a thing has stopped truly watching. Corvin Race had decided nothing. That was the difference between us, and it was the whole difference. While the rest of us sorted the guests into the trusted and the doubtful by the cut of their coats, the man at the door simply watched them all, equally, with a patience that had no opinion in it at all. On the third night, the star went missing. I learned it the way a steward learns everything, by the change in the air before the words came. It was after the late supper, the hall settling toward sleep, the fires banked low. The dowager had gone up. Then her maid, Joan, came down the great stair too fast, one hand pressed to her chest, and found me in the screen's passage, and she did not have to say it. Her face said it. The box, she got out. In the muniment room, it's open. It's empty. The cold that went through me, then, had nothing to do with the storm. I will tell you plainly what should have happened by every rule of that house and did not. The muniment room sits at the dead end of the inner passage. There is one way in and one way out, and across that one way, all that long evening had stood Corvin Race. For a thing to leave that room, it had to pass the door. For it to pass the door, it had to pass the man. And the man had not moved, had not slept, had not so much as set down his rifle. I knew it because I had passed him myself 4 times through the evening on my rounds, and 4 times he had been exactly as I left him. A straight green line in the lamplight, eyes forward, alive behind the stillness. So either the man at the door was a liar and a thief, or something had happened in that passage that no rule of the house had a shape for. And the house, when it gathered in the hall an hour later, robed, sleep-creased, frightened, 11 guests and the family and every servant roused, looked first, of course, at the man it understood least and trusted by habit. It did not look at the guardsman. Few of them truly saw him even now. It looked at Gerald Ashby. I do not know who said his name first. It rose the way these things rise in a frightened room from no one and everyone, a murmur, a glance passed hand to hand, the poor cousin, the thin coat, the eager laugh, of course, who else? By the time the dowager came down, leaning harder on her cane than I had ever seen her lean, the room had already tried him and convicted him in its head, and Ashby stood near the cold hearth with his hands open at his sides, and the dawning, sick understanding of a man who feels a thing closing on him that he cannot push back. "I never touched it," he said, his voice cracked on it. "Before God, I have never been near the room. I don't even know where it is." "No one is accusing you," said Lord Marrow, in the voice men use when that is exactly what they are doing. "Then why are you all looking at me?" No one answered him. The silence answered him. I watched it happen, and I felt the current pulling me with it, and I am not proud of how easily it pulled. Every neat fact lined up against the man. He was poor, the rest were not. He was a near stranger, the rest were known. He had asked the first night with that too eager warmth whether the star was as fine as the story said, an innocent question from any other mouth, damning from his. The mind wants a thief it can understand, and a desperate poor man is the thief the comfortable mind reaches for first. I felt my own mind reach for him. I am telling you my shame so you will believe the rest. And then I looked, almost by accident, at the door of the passage, at Corvin Race, still at his post, though the thing he guarded was already gone, and I stopped. Because Race was not looking at Gerald Ashby. The whole room had turned its weight toward the cold hearth and the cornered cousin. The guardsman alone had not. His eyes, and I had learned, those 2 winters, to read the small country of that man's face when nothing else moved on it. His eyes were resting, level and unhurried, on someone else entirely. On someone standing well back from the firelight, on the edge of the gathered group, wearing the easy, sorrowful expression of a man who had nothing to fear because all the fear in the room had found another home. I followed the line of that gaze, and at the end of it stood Roderick Vale. Let me tell you about Roderick, because here the tale turns, and it turns on him. He was the dowager's nephew, her late husband's brother's son, and by the cruel arithmetic of a line that had buried its sons, he was the heir. He would have Harrowfell when she was gone, the land and the name and the star with it. He was perhaps 40, well-made, well-spoken, a handsome man who wore his expensive coat the way Ashby wore his thin one, as a statement. He had come up the moor road early, before the worst of the snows, in a fine sleigh with a fine pair, and he had spent the 3 days being charming to everyone and attentive to the dowager, and quietly, constantly, taking the measure of the house that would one day be his. He laughed at the right moments. He carried the old woman's shawl. The room loved him. The room would have been astonished that night to learn that the one set of eyes in the house that did not love him belonged to the silent man at the door whom the room had forgotten was a man at all. I did not understand it yet. I only understood that Corvin Race, who had no opinion of anyone, had an opinion of Roderick Vale, and that he had had it for some time. I made my decision then, the only useful one I made that whole long night. I did not say a word to the room. I crossed it slowly, as a steward crosses a room 100 times an evening, refilling, tending, invisible, and I came to stand near the mouth of the passage, near the door, near the man. And under the noise of Lord Marrow pressing Ashby and the dowager calling for quiet, I said low, not turning my head, "You saw something." Race did not turn his head either. For a long moment I thought he would not answer at all, that he would keep his watch and his counsel, and let the room do its worst. Then, so quietly that the words seemed to come from the stones rather than the man, he said, "The box was open when she found it, but the box did not unlock itself, and the door did not open itself, and the star did not walk." "Then how?" "It did not pass me tonight," he said. "It passed me last night, before there was anyone at this door to see it pass." I felt the floor of the whole evening shift under me. "Last night," I said, "but she wore it the first night and locked it away herself. We all saw." "You saw her lock the box," Race said. "You did not see what was in it when she did." And there it was, the first thread of it, pulled gently loose by a man who had been quietly holding the whole tangle in his hands for a full day, while the rest of us blundered toward the wrong throat. I stood there with my heart going hard, and I understood that I had badly misjudged the night, and the house, and the man at the door, and that the only person under that roof who had judged nothing in haste was the one we had all spent 2 winters mistaking for furniture. I could not press him there, with the room a yard away and the dowager calling for order. But I caught his eye one last time before I went back into the heat and the noise, and I gave him the smallest nod a steward can give, the nod that says, between 2 men who keep a house, I am with you, tell me when you can. He returned nothing that anyone watching would have called a return, but the corner of his mouth moved, by perhaps the width of a hair, and I took my answer from it and went. The night ground on. The dowager, to her great credit, would not let the room hang Ashby on a murmur. "We are snowed in," she said, rapping her cane once on the flags, "which means whoever did this is snowed in with us, and the star is going nowhere either, for there is no road off this moor for any thief to take it down. So we will not behave like a mob in our own hall. We will look for it in the morning in the light like sensible people, and until then no one leaves this house, which the snow has kindly arranged for us already." It bought the night, but I saw the looks that followed Ashby up the stair to his cold little room under the eaves, and I knew the morning's, sensible looking, had one ending already written for it unless someone changed the page. It fell to me and the man at the door to change it. I came back to him in the gray hour before dawn, when the house had finally fallen into its uneasy sleep, and the only sounds were the wind worrying the eaves and the storm flinging snow at the high windows like handfuls of sand. He had been relieved of his post. There was no longer anything behind the door worth guarding, but I found him not gone to his bed but standing in the dark muniment passage, hat off now, looking at the open iron box on its shelf as though the box itself might still have something to tell him. The fur was set down. Out of the tall hat he looked smaller and older and more ordinary, a tired man in the green of a house that had little left to pay him, and I liked him better for it. "Tell me," I said, "the way you'd tell it to a man who wants to do right by your cousin Ashby, who is not your cousin and not mine, and is going to lose his name and maybe worse for a thing he didn't do, unless we are quick." He told me. He told it plainly, in order, the way a soldier renders a report, and as he spoke I understood for the first time the kind of watch the man had been keeping all along, not the ceremony the rest of us saw, but the real thing underneath it. "The first night," he said, "she wore it to the table, and after she came down the passage to lock it away, I stood the door. She held the box to the lamp to set the star inside the way she does she likes to see at home, and I saw it go in. The blue catches the light, you cannot mistake it. It went into the box and the box was locked, and she gave me good night and went up." He paused. "That was the first night, the night the storm closed the road. And the second night, the long night proper. She did not wear it the second night." I frowned. "She always wears it the second." "She did not," he said, with the quiet certainty of a man stating a thing he had watched with his own eyes. "She came down to the hall in the silver, but with her throat bare. I marked it because I mark what changes, and I thought little of it, an old woman's chill, a forgotten clasp, her own affair, until later." He looked at the box. "Later that second night, very late, after the hall had emptied and before any guard was set on this door for the deep watch, a man came down this passage with a candle. He did not see me. I was off the door by then, taking my hour in the dark of the gun room there, where a man's eyes find the corridor but the corridor does not find him. A pause. An old habit. I do not sleep well in a house I do not yet trust. "A man," I said. "What man?" "He had a key," Race said, "or a thing that did the work of one. He opened the door and he was inside a short while, and he came out and locked it again and went back up, soft as a cat, well pleased with himself. I marked his step. I marked his coat. And I told myself, in the morning I will say a word to the steward, for that is a thing the steward should know." And in the morning the storm had taken the chimney over the gun room, and we were all of us till noon hauling snow and patching slate to keep the kitchen fires lit. And by the time it was done the moment was past, and a guardsman does not run to the steward with, "I saw a man go to the muniment room in the night," when the man he saw is the heir of the house, and the box is still locked, and the lady has said nothing missing. He let that sit. So I held it, and I watched him. And I waited to be wrong. And tonight she went to wear it again. And the box was open and the star was gone, Race finished. And the man I watched go down this passage last night before any door was guarded stood at the back of the hall tonight and watched a poor stranger take the weight of it. That is what I saw. That is all I saw. It is not proof. A guardsman's eyes are not a court. But you asked me what I saw, and I will not unsee it to spare anyone. I stood a long moment in the cold dark with all of it turning over in me. It hung together. God help me. It hung together better than the case against Ashby ever had, and the case against Ashby had a poor man's coat for evidence and nothing else. But Race was right that it was not proof. It was the word of a forgotten guardsman against the heir of the house, in a room full of people who saw Roderick Vale as the future of Harrowfell and Corvin Race as a piece of the wall. Spoken aloud in that hall by that mouth, it would not save Ashby. It would only end Race. Why didn't she wear it the second night? I said, half to myself. That's the thread. Why bare her throat on the long night of all nights when she's worn the star on the long night every year of her life? Race looked at me, and for the first time something that was almost a question moved behind his still face. I have asked myself that since, he said. I do not have it, but I will tell you what I think, steward, for what a guardsman's thinking is worth. I think the answer to that is the whole answer. I think the man went down this passage in the night and opened that box, and I do not think he found the star in it. I think he found it already gone. The notion was so strange that I laughed once, without meaning to, a short, ugly sound in that cold passage. Gone before the thief took it. Then who took it from the thief? I did not say a thief took it, Race said. I said it was gone. Those are not the same thing. And he said no more, because a guardsman who has given his honest report does not embroider it, and a wise steward, once he has been handed a thread he does not yet understand, stops pulling on the man and starts pulling on the thread. I bade Race go to his bed at last. He went, straight-backed and tired, a forgotten man who had just quietly turned the whole night on its hinge, and I climbed the stair in the cold dawn light to do the one thing that frightened me more than any of it. I went to wake the dowager. She was not asleep. I should have known she would not be. She sat up in her great curtained bed with a single candle and a shawl about her shoulders and her white hair down, and she looked smaller than she ever looked by day, and far older, and her hand when it lay on the coverlet was the hand of a very old woman who has not slept. But her eyes, when they came up to me, were the eyes I knew, straight, dry, unfooled. "You have something to say, Mervyn," she said. She has called me Mervyn for 30 years. It is the nearest thing to affection she permits herself. Say it. I am too tired to dig it out of you. So I said it. I told her what Race had seen, the bare throat on the long night, the man with the key in the passage, the man who had opened the box and found it empty, the man who had then stood at the back of the hall and let a stranger drown for it. I did not name Roderick. I did not have to. I watched her face as I laid it out, and I watched the thing I dreaded most. I watched her not be surprised. That was when I knew there was a deeper floor beneath the one I had been standing on. "Madam," I said very carefully into the silence she let grow, "why did you not wear the star on the long night?" For a long moment she did not answer. The candle guttered in some draught from the storm and threw her shadow huge and wavering on the bed curtains. When she spoke at last, her voice had lost its dry edge and gone to something quieter and far more dangerous. "Because there was no star to wear," she said. "There has been no star to wear for 3 months, Mervyn. What your sharp-eyed guardsman saw me lock into that box on the first night was a clever blue paste and worn silver that cost me £11 from an honest man in the town who asks no questions. The Vale star, the true one, I sold in the autumn. Quietly, through agents. To keep this roof on this house and these people fed and your wages and Pell's wages paid and the mortgage off the lower farms and the name unshamed for one more winter." Her chin came up, and there was the iron, even now, even broken. "I would do it again tomorrow. A house is not a stone in a box. A house is the people in it, kept warm and kept whole. I sold the stone to keep the people. And I told no one, because the moment it is known that the Vales have sold the star, the Vales are finished, the credit gone, the connections cooled, the vultures circling a carcass. So I wore the false one at my own table and smiled, and locked it away each night with my own hand, and meant for no living soul to ever know. I stood there with the floor of the whole world rearranging itself, a third time in one night. Then nothing was stolen, I said slowly. The box had a worthless copy in it, and someone opened the box in the night, found the copy, knew at once it was a copy because a man who means to steal the star has studied the star, and a copy does not fool a man who has come to a snowbound house for the express purpose of taking the real one. Go on, said the dowager softly. She was watching me the way Race watched a passage. You are nearly there. He found the copy, I said, and the cold of it climbed my spine, and he understood that the star was already gone, sold, hidden, he could not know which, and that his whole plan was ruined. He came to this house under the snow to take the star and be gone before the thaw, with the storm itself for his alibi, and instead he found a worthless lump of paste and a problem. So he changed his plan. He could not steal the star, so he stole something else instead. He stole the theft. There it is, the old woman breathed. He left the empty box for someone else to find. He let it be stolen, because a star that is stolen by a poor desperate cousin in the night is a star that is gone, and gone in a way that no one will ever question, no one will ever search the agent's books for, no one will ever discover was sold 3 months before. The insurance, the family reckoning when you are dead, the whisper that follows the name, all of it laid at the feet of a hanged stranger. And you, madam, I could barely say it. You could never tell the truth to clear Ashby. Because to clear Ashby you would have to say the star was already gone. You would have to confess you sold it. He has built a trap with 2 jaws, and you are caught in one of them as surely as Ashby is caught in the other. If the cousin hangs, your secret is safe and your nephew is clean. If you save the cousin, you ruin your own house to do it. He has made your silence the lock on the cell. The Dowager Countess Ardith Vale, who had buried a husband and 2 sons and not been pitied for any of it, put her old hand over her eyes in the candlelight, and for the space of 3 breaths she was simply a tired woman who had been outmaneuvered in her own house by the boy who would inherit it. Then she took the hand away, and the iron was back, colder than I had ever seen it. My nephew, she said, is cleverer than I gave him credit for, and crueler. He has measured exactly how much I will sacrifice to keep this house, and he has wagered that I will sacrifice a stranger before I sacrifice the name. She looked at me. He is wrong, Mervyn. But proving him wrong will cost me everything I sold the star to save. Unless, and here her eyes went slowly to the dark beyond the door, toward the passage and the man who was no longer standing in it. Unless the guardsman who has watched everyone in this house for 2 winters watched a little more carefully than my nephew supposed. So at first light I went and woke Corvin Race a second time, and I asked him the question on which the whole house now hung. Not what did you see, I had that. The other one. The one a soldier is trained to answer and a courtier never thinks to ask. The man who came down the passage in the night, I said. You marked his step, you marked his coat. Did you mark his hands? And Corvin Race, who had stood his watch in some hard place where the price of a wandering mind was paid in blood, looked at me with those deep-water eyes and said, A man who opens a strange box in the dark with a candle in one hand burns himself. Every time. They always do. They tip the flame to see the lock, and the wax runs, and it catches the back of the hand that holds the box steady. He turned his own right hand over, and there on the back of it, old and pale, was the small shiny seam of just such a burn, the souvenir of some night long before Harrowfell. I have the mark myself, from learning it the hard way. When he came back up the passage, he was holding his right hand the way a man holds a fresh burn, close and careful, and not letting the cuff touch it. I marked it because I mark what changes. I did not know what it meant. I know now. It was not proof, but it was a thread you could pull in front of the whole house in the open in the light, and pulling it would cost the dowager nothing, give away no secret, sell no second star. It asked one question only of one man, and let the man's own hand answer it. We did it that morning in the great hall, with the storm still white and roaring at the windows and the whole snowbound house gathered. The dowager called them down guests, family, servants, and she did not call it a trial, for it was not one. She called it sense. We will look for the star in the light, as I said, she told them. And we will begin by looking honestly at last night, all of last night, and not only at the part of it that flatters our fears. She let that land. Then she turned with great deliberateness to the corner of the hall where Corvin Race stood his post once more, for I had asked him to stand it, in full kit, fur and gloves and straight back, not as a guard now, but as a witness the house could not pretend was furniture. My guardsman stood the inner door the whole of the evening. The star is said to have vanished, she said. It is a foolish house that keeps a watchman at a door and never thinks to ask the watchman what he saw. Race. Tell them. The room turned, all of it, and looked at the man it had forgotten was a man. And you could feel the surprise move through it like a draft, the slow, startled recognition that there had been a pair of eyes at that door all along. Race did not raise his voice. He never did. He told them in the same plain order he had told me, only this time he stopped at the burn. He told them a man had come down the passage in the night before any guard was set with a key or the work of one, and opened the box and come back up holding his right hand close and careful, the way a man holds a fresh burn from a candle tipped over a lock. He did not say the name. A guardsman renders his report. He does not pronounce the sentence. He laid the fact down in the middle of the room and stepped back into his stillness and let it lie there. And the room, which the night before had needed no proof at all to convict a poor man on his coat, now sat in silence and discovered that it could not help but look. Every one of them, helplessly, the way you cannot help but look at the thing a clever man has just told you not to look at the hands of the people in it. Most hands were folded, or wrapped warm against the cold, or holding cups. One man, near the cold hearth, had been standing all this while with his right hand resting easy in his coat pocket, the picture of a man at his leisure, and had kept it there a beat too long, and now, feeling the room's eyes find it, feeling the trap close from a direction he had never thought to guard, drew it out to show how empty and innocent it was. He drew it out fast, the way you do a thing to prove it is nothing. And across the back of it, livid and unmistakable and 3 days old, ran the long red wheel of a burn from a candle tipped over a lock in the dark. Roderick Vale looked at his own hand, as though it belonged to a stranger. It is a small thing, a burn. It proves a man held a candle awkwardly. It does not by itself prove a theft. A cleverer man, a colder man, would have laughed and said he scalded it on the kitchen kettle and dared them to make more of it. But Race had done the one thing the whole scheme could not survive. He had made the air of Harrowfell visible. He had taken the man the room loved and could not imagine suspecting, and quietly, immovably, set him in the center of the room's attention and held him there. And a scheme like Roderick's lives only in the dark behind a forgotten stranger's back. Dragged into the open, with every eye in the house on his branded hand and a guardsman's level testimony hanging in the air, it had nowhere left to live. I watched it die in his face. I watched him understand that the furniture had been awake. This is absurd, he said, but the room had already turned, the warmth he had banked for 3 days gone out of it all at once. A burn. You would take the word of a hired sentry over. Over my heir, said the dowager, and her voice in that hall was the coldest thing in a house full of snow. Yes, Roderick, I would. I have taken a hired sentry's word over a great many fine coats in my long life, and I have never once been sorry for it. She rose, leaning on her cane, and crossed the room to stand before her nephew, an old woman a head shorter than the man, and the man gave back a step from her. You went to the box in the night, she said, low, for the whole silent room. And you found in it a thing that told you your clever plan had already failed before you began it. And rather than go home empty-handed, you decided to burn a stranger to the ground to cover a theft that never even came off. That is who you are. That is the man who would have had this house. She looked at him a long moment more. You will not have it now. There was nowhere for him to go. That is the cruel mercy of a snowbound house. It keeps the guilty in as surely as it kept the honest man from fleeing. He could not ride off into the white and let the story cool behind him. He had to stand there in the hall of the house he had meant to inherit and watch every face in it turn away from him, one by one, with that particular contempt a room keeps for a man who has hurt the weak to spare himself. In the end he said nothing more at all. He went up to his fine room to wait out the storm that had been his accomplice and was now his jailer. And 3 days later, when the pass at last opened, he went down the moor road in his fine sleigh alone, and the house of Vale never spoke his name again. Gerald Ashby they did not hang, nor shame, nor send away. The room that had been so quick to try him was now ashamed of itself, which is the most useful thing a room can be, and it tried to make it up to him with a warmth as eager as its suspicion had been. The dowager kept him on at Harrowfell after the thaw, found him honest work in an honest place, and if you go up the moor road today you will find him still there, grayer now, trusted now, a fixture of the house that once nearly destroyed him. He never knew the whole of it. He never knew there had been no star to steal. He knew only that he had been falsely accused, and that a silent man at a door had stood up for the truth of him when the whole warm room would not. That was enough for Ashby. It was more than most men get. And the secret held. That is the part I am proudest of, and the part I have never told until now, when the dowager is 20 years in her grave and the last of those who would be hurt by it are gone. The house never learned that the true Vale star had been sold in the autumn to keep its own roof on. The world went on believing the star was simply, sorrowfully, never recovered, lost on a snowbound night to a thief who was caught too late to make him give it back. The dowager wore the 11-pound copy at the next long night and the next, and every one until she died, and smiled at her own table, and let the firelight move in the false blue stone, and no one ever knew that the real treasure of the house of Vale was not the thing around her neck at all. It was her own straight back. It was the people she had kept warm with the price of it, and it was the man at the door. I have thought a great deal in the years since about why Roderick's scheme so nearly worked, and why it did not. It nearly worked because it counted on something almost everyone in that house could be counted on for, the easy comfort of suspecting the man you already looked down on, and the easy blindness toward the man you already admired. It failed for one reason only. There was, in that house, one man who did neither. Corvin Race had not looked down on the poor cousin nor up at the rich nephew. He had simply watched them both, equally, with a patience that held no opinion in it at all. And so, when the truth came down the passage with a candle in the night, his were the only eyes in the house clear enough to mark it. We mistook his stillness for emptiness for 2 whole winters. We thought the man who stood at the door had gone somewhere inside himself, the way you do at a post no one expects anything of. We were wrong about that the way we were wrong about everything that winter. He had not gone anywhere. He was there the whole time, behind the unmoving face, doing the quiet work that a house only discovers it cannot live without on the one night it almost does. He asked for no thanks, and the dowager, who understood him, gave him none in front of the others. Only, the morning the pass opened, she stopped before his post and looked up into that still face and said, "Thank you, Race, for not deciding anything in haste," which from that woman was the whole of a medal. And he gave her back the smallest nod a guardsman can give, and stood his door. I am an old man now, and I have served Harrowfell my whole life, and I have learned that a house is not kept by its walls or its treasures or even by its name. It is kept by the few who watch when no one thinks watching is needed, and who hold their judgment when everyone around them has spent theirs, and who, on the worst night, stand up plainly for the truth of a man no one else will speak for. The snow keeps the world out, but it cannot keep out the thing that does the most harm under any roof, the lie that a frightened room is so eager to believe. Against that, a house has only one defense, and that winter I learned its name. It was a forgotten man at a quiet door who decided nothing until he was sure, and then would not be moved.